43% of Americans admit feeling addicted to their phones.
We're not addicted to our phones. Our phones are just the needle. What's coming through the phone into us is what we're actually addicted to, which is I was about 7 hours and 23 minutes a day on my phone. 7 hours a day equals 49 hours a week. That equals 100 days a year. I will spend over 10 years of my remaining 30 looking at my screen. You know what? I'm gonna do an experiment on myself and see what life would look like if I just don't look at a screen for 2 months.
Carlos Whittaker spent years in the spotlight, but it's what happened when he turned down the noise that changed everything. In a world more connected than ever, he's sounding the alarm on a crisis of disconnection. Because life isn't just about getting better, it's about being whole.
Let's talk about the monastery.
23 hours a day of silence. The first 2 days, anxiety, night sweats. I was coming off of a drug. This is the only way I can really put it into words for people to understand what it felt like for my brain to finally have silence.
Some interesting data I want to kind of run by you.
Let's do it.
Americans spend an average of 4.5 hours per day on their phones. That's the average. 43% of Americans admit feeling addicted to their phones. I looked at my cell phone usage today.
Yeah.
I thought I should probably take a look at this.
Oh, wow.
No clue.
Uh-huh.
My usage last week was 2 hours and 59 minutes a day.
Which is actually great.
Is it?
You're really good.
That was my first question.
Yeah.
What is considered to be healthy, good?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be dependent on the person what healthy is. But I would say you're right. You know, what the percentage was 43% of Americans.
43% of Americans admit to feeling.
Admit to feeling, right? Okay, so I would say that most of the people that I know are upwards of 5 to 6 hours a day. When I knew that I had a problem, I was about 7 hours and 23 minutes a day on my phone. Now, immediately I'm like, well, that's what I do for a living. I make YouTube videos. I'm on Instagram. I talk to my phone. So I kind of made an excuse. But the truth is, Ken, I'll go and tell you right now, like you're living a lot more life than most Americans are living. And what I mean by that is an American that's on their phone 7 hours a day, like me, which is honestly is a lot. There's a lot of, I don't have
where
the
do you
data.
think, where would you guess that falls?
I'm going to guess that falls within at least 50% of Americans that use their phones are on at least 5 to 6 to 7 hours a day. 7 hours a day equals 49 hours a week. So that's 2 entire cycles of the sun around planet Earth that we're looking at a screen. That equals 100 days a year. You start doing the math and it starts freaking you out, right? 100 days a year, that's at 7 hours a day. And if you live to be 85 years old and I'm 51, I will spend over 10 years of my remaining 30 looking at my screen. And I think when you start doing that math, you could even go with 3 hours a day and you start doing the math.
I felt bad, to be honest with you.
Well, you'll quickly realize that 3 hours a day probably will end up equaling about a month and a half a year that you're spending looking at your phone.
Yeah. I didn't like it. And then I immediately started to go, okay, I'm not doing that in large chunks. I know that just because I know my daily rhythm.
Yeah.
I'm also 50 and I don't have the habits of like my kids, which just really disturbs me.
Sure.
The amount of time my 3 kids are staring at their phone.
Yeah.
They have friends over to the house and they sit in the room together. And I said to my wife, my son was home from college. He's got 3 other 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
Not quiet creatures. And they're up in the bonus room.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a little quiet. And I had been distracted. And I said to my wife, Ty and his buddies leave.
Yeah.
She said, no, they're still up there.
Yeah.
And I went, huh. And I knew exactly what it was. Yeah. They're all sitting in the room staring at their phone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're going to get into a lot of this. I'm going to come back to how I might accumulate 2 hours and 59 minutes. But I want to stay with you on the awareness.
Yeah.
What was it that you finally look into that number of 7 hours and you go, ugh?
Yeah. It was that Sunday notification that most people with smartphones get on Sunday. You get a little notification that slides across your screen that says, you have averaged. And what we normally do is before we look at it, we swipe it away. You don't want to look at it, right? We're just like, I don't want to know.
Why would I want to know?
Why would I want to know? It doesn't matter. I'm fine. Everyone's happy around me. But one Sunday, I decided to look at it, and I clicked it open, and when it said 7 hours and 20-something odd minutes, I thought to my average. That was my average that week, okay? So that means there was days with more.
Right.
I thought to myself, let me do the math. And then I started doing the math. And that's when I realized that I was going to spend over 10 years of my life looking at my phone. And I just released a book at the time then called How to Human. And I thought, I'm writing a book called How to Human. And I'm looking at my phone 7 hours a day. This isn't right. So, you know me, we've known each other long enough that I make some pretty shocking decisions. I just like throw everything to the wind. I say, you know what? I'm going to do an experiment on myself and see what life would look like if I not just try to limit it to 3 hours a day, but just don't look at a screen for 2 months and see what happens. So that was the decision that I made. I decided to not look at a single iPhone, Apple Watch, laptop, TV, iPad, no screens at all, no consumption for 2 months, and see what happens to my brain.
What kind of planning went into that after you made that decision?
A lot of planning. I also wanted some data, right? I knew that like I could figure it out on my own, like what would it feel like, but I decided to get the medical field involved. So I got a neuroscientist, Dr. Daniel Amen, scanned my brain before and after. So I had like what it looked like before and after. So I have like all that data. But then there was just a lot of planning on where was I going to go? What was I going to do? Initially, it was like, well, maybe I'll just go find a little cabin in the mountains somewhere. But I quickly realized I would go insane. Like this experiment wasn't about Carlos going insane. It was about, well, what would life look like if I maybe was living without this thing? And so I was like, there have to be some subcultures in America that aren't as reliant on technology as we are. So immediately I just started thinking about monks. It's like, well, monks.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
Monks and Amish. Like, of course, Amish. Right. Amish, I go to Etheridge, Tennessee is close to here. There's Amish. When I go visit them, they're never holding phones. Right. So let's do that. So that's where a lot of the planning started to come in. Like I had to go find a monastery, find a Amish family that was going to let this rando dude come and live with them with tattoos.
What did that look like? To get the Amish family to go, we'll let you hang with us.
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 no's from different Amish families.
But I mean, do you drive up there?
Yeah, okay.
Get out. I'm picturing you. I mean, you're a very winsome guy.
Sure, yeah.
You
something
walk
I would
up,
do. Yeah.
you knock on the door.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carlos. I'd like to live with you for a project.
Yeah,
How does that go down?
So there was some of that, to be honest with you. Luckily, we have a friend of ours named Leanne Miller who lives in Worcester, Ohio. And she is married to a former Amish man named Daryl.
Okay.
And we call him D. And so D is still really close to his family. His Amish family. They still have Sunday lunches and things like that. So D was my first call.
Okay.
D, do you know anybody? And D is still, you can take the boy out of the Amish, but you have a hard time taking the Amish out of the man, right?
Yeah.
And so D is still pretty Amish. Right. He's got his big beard, and I was like, D, do you think any of your family will let me live with them? And I'll just never forget, it was 30 seconds of silence. And it felt like 30 hours. And he goes, well, I don't think so. But we can find out.
Right.
And so I actually drove up there to Worcester, went with D, and visited 2 or 3 families. Almost like let them interview me.
Sure.
These are families that he said might let me do it. And so we tried and we figured it out. And I thought I was going to live with one, but after like 3 weeks, they backed out and they're like, sorry, we just don't feel comfortable. Totally fine. Then the next family I tried, no. So just kept getting no's and no's to where it turned out I was just going to live with the monks and I wasn't going to do an Amish thing. And about a week before I went to the monastery, D called back and said, I think I found you a family. The Millers, they're a sheep farming family. I talked to him and he's like, yeah, we'd let Carlos live with us. And I was like, really? So they said yes. And so then suddenly I had my 2 weeks planned with the Amish. But I had to get the monks to let me live there too, right? So it wasn't just the Amish. So I had the Amish set. The monks was kind of cool because it's an abbey in the high desert of Southern California with 20 Benedictine monks. And when my wife was a little girl, her father lived in LA and was a high capacity volunteer at this monastery. So like they would have festivals there and he was just always very involved, really good friends with a lot of the monks when my wife was 2 or 3. Well, she still remembers some of those monks. So she called Abbot Francis, who was the abbot when she was a little girl, and said, Abbot Francis, I don't know if you remember me. Heather Barcume was my maiden name. Oh, yes, I remember you used to run around up the hills and in the chapel. I remember you. So Heather asked if her husband could come and live with them for a few weeks. And it took a little bit of going up the Catholic chain of command,
Right.
All the way down to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles.
Wow.
But because normally they only let guests stay for 2 or 3 days, but I was asking for 14 days. And they let me go all in. So
No way.
I became monkless.
All right, so let's pick up there. So,
Okay.
because what as I was thinking about this, I'm thinking about the 14 days with the monks, a lot of silence. I'm thinking time with the Amish, no gadgets.
Right.
Is that a fair character? Okay. So let's talk about the monastery. You go 14 days.
Yeah.
How silent are you?
23 hours a day of silence. So I went, imagine, from 7 hours a day on my phone, content consumption, creating things, talking to people, to 23 hours a day of silence. Lunch was the only meal you could speak. So, I'd have about 30 minutes of conversation at lunch, and I would talk and talk and talk. Those poor monks. I was just like,
Yeah. Are they quiet? I mean, they get 1 hour a day. Are they ramping
would
it
talk
up?
more. They would talk more than the 1 hour a day. I got about 1 hour a day of talking because I was just alone. So the monks would work together and they would talk, and things like that. So they would have grand silence every day. So grand silence would last from 7 p.m. to about 8 a.m. But during the day, they would talk, they would work, they would do things like this.
But you're isolated?
I'm kind of, it's not like I'm working with
They
the
didn't
monks.
give you a job.
They didn't really give me a job. So I'm really alone. Now, the thing was, I'd gotten my brain scan before I went to the monastery. And when I got there, those first 48 hours were terrifying. I mean, when you don't realize how often when we have nothing to do, you just,
Oh, yeah.
and you're there in the grocery store, in a waiting room, and the amount of times I reached for my phone and it wasn't there. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just sit here?
Right.
Yeah. I did a lot of that. And the first 2 days, physical symptoms of anxiety, night sweats. I would wake up at 2 a.m. the first night soaking wet, thinking like if you have the flu and your fever breaks, like that kind of what is happening in my body, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, like physical manifestations of anxiety. And I quickly realized that I was coming off of a drug. I was legitimately, my body was reacting to my serotonin levels and dopamine levels that were being used to doing this, to just doing, my body was having reactions to it.
It feels like the nervous system, what little I know about that, your nervous system was readjusting.
Absolutely readjusting. And, after when I went back to the neuroscientist, he told me, absolutely, you were detoxing.
And speaking of detoxing, I know that in my life, the best way to detox is to get the junk out of me in front of somebody who knows how to handle it, a professional therapist. And that's why I'm so excited that our show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy isn't just for people dealing with major trauma. Therapy can be about that, but it's also a really valuable tool for anyone looking to unlock their potential and become a better version of themselves. I can see in my own life through therapy how I'm becoming a better listener and better communicator at home and in the office. So if you're thinking about trying therapy, I want you to contact BetterHelp. BetterHelp is 100% online, so it's affordable and convenient for your schedule. And it's the largest online therapy provider in the world. BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. They also have over 10 years of experience in matching people with the right therapist for them. And check this out, they're rated 4.8 out of 5 on the App Store. That's not easy. And with over 141,000 reviews. So to get started, just fill out a quick online survey and get matched with a licensed therapist. Then if it's not the right fit, here's some great news. You can switch therapists at any time, easily, for no extra cost. So talk it out with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Ken to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/Ken. what I love about what you write about in this book and through this experiment is you're really helping us not just with detoxing, and we're going to get into that detox and what that was like, but there's also something powerful about silence.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between loneliness and solitude.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I feel like I want to know, what did you learn in those 14 days after the shaking and your nervous system resets? What did you learn about the power of solitude and or silence?
Yeah. I learned very quickly that first of all, we don't know what to do with it. We are the first generation walking planet Earth that doesn't have regular access to solitude. So up until the car radio was placed into a car, people had to travel from point A to point B if they were alone in silence, in solitude. The second a car radio got put in, that went away. And that wasn't too long ago. And so we're actually having to adapt to this loss of solitude. I think it's actually so vital and important that people have daily moments of solitude. I'm not saying you have to have 23 hours a day like I did, right? I went to the monastery, so you don't have to.
Right.
But this is what I learned, is that there was such power in me having all of this time to let my mind go places that maybe it would never have gone with the screen. You know how many ideas I think are lost because we Google? How many ideas I think are lost because we're even in conversation brainstorming with people? I think brainstorming's great. I think Google's great. I think AI is great. But I think we've lost so many great ideas because we don't spend time in solitude. And so the amount of ideas I got those 14 days for my future and my plans and dreams and visions exploded because I had all of this time in solitude. And it was very healing. And I just feel like it's something that a lot of leaders especially are missing in their life. They're going 100 miles an hour. They've got a constant stream of information coming in that they literally don't have the capacity to maybe hear what they're supposed to hear.
I think that's absolutely right. That may be one of the most powerful things that I've heard in a while is that right there. You don't even have the capacity to truly process. And that's what I'm wondering. Did the healing come because you had so much silence and solitude that it gave your brain time to do what it's supposed to do and then seep down? And this is not scientific, but I'm just wondering, I'm trying to get there to go, what is that like? To be so silent and in solitude, did it allow your brain to flush everything out and also flush it down? And then did you find yourself processing things you didn't expect to process?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Let me explain it this way. This is the only way I can really put it into words for people to understand what it felt like for my brain to finally have silence. So that 6 seconds may have felt like 30, right? Like that was just silence for 6 seconds. So
it makes us all.
Yeah. I mean, you even nodded like, whoa, there's something different that just happened.
100%.
Nobody said anything.
Yeah.
And when you have that all day long, the way that I describe it is when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, I moved here in 2010, and I'd never had asthma my entire life. Like I moved here, my wife started telling me, hey babe, like a month into living here, you're wheezing every night. Now, I'm a 30-something-year-old man at the time. I was like, what do you mean I'm wheezing? She's like, you sound like Darth Vader when you're sleeping. And I was like, I feel fine. I'm exercising, I'm running. So she's like, you should go to an allergist. I was like, babe, I'm fine. But I go just to kind of appease her. I go into the allergist. I was like, my wife says I sound like Darth Vader. He goes, well, blow into this little tube for me. So I blow into this tube hard as I can. He goes, oh, wow, you're only using about 60% of your lung capacity. I said, what do you mean? I feel like I just blew as hard as I could. I feel like I blew 100%. He's like, no, you're only using 60%. Here. And he pulls out a little inhaler. I don't know if you've ever seen an inhaler. You know, sure. So I've never used one before. He's like, shake it up. I want you to take a hit. And then the second breath, you're going to go from 60% to 100%. I was like, okay. So I shake it. That second breath that I took, Ken, I almost started crying because it was the fullest breath I'd taken in over a month. And I didn't even know that I was suffocating. And I feel like so many leaders out there, don't even know that they're not breathing, don't even know that they're not thinking, don't even know that they're not leading with the capacity that they have available to them because they're not taking this inhaler of solitude and silence. And so that's the only clear way I can describe what it felt like, not in my lungs, but in my mind. It was like, suddenly I just could see more clearly. I was like so sharp in conversations I was having with the monks, conversations I was having with the other guests, ideas that were forming, things even in my faith or whatever it may be, questions that I didn't have answers on podcasts and answers on my phone all the time. I had to actually just wonder about things. I couldn't find out the answer. And so I'm telling you what, that solitude piece is so vital to your listeners and people that are watching right now. If you one of the things I'm doing, I'm launching this thing called Human School, where I'm teaching people about all of these things that I learned. And one of the exercises is for 1 hour a week. That's all I want you to do, 1 hour a week. I want you to go find a bench or a space with no screens, and I want you to sit there in silence for 1 hour and see if you can get there. You may only last 5 minutes the first time, but see if you can't work your way up to an hour. And what'll end up happening is that will be one of the most powerful hours you have with no input, no podcast. Don't go on a walk with your AirPods in. Go on a walk with nothing.
And no journaling?
No journaling, just sitting. And it's a really powerful tool that I think a lot of people have forgotten about.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to, so you come out of that.
Yeah.
And so then you go spend time with the Amish. This is a wholly different deal.
Bro, it was like...
Do they put you to work? Or are you freeloading on the couch?
Do you see my cute little soft hands, little East LA city hands?
Like Carlos the Sheep Farmer is a show I'd like to see.
No, listen. The fact that I walked onto this farm, and first of all, I'm scared to death. Like at least the monks, like I don't know. I'd worked at a church before. I mean, I don't know if I could maybe get 10% of what the monks were doing.
You had context for that.
The Amish, bro, like they're a very private community. And they invited me in, and I get driven up in a convertible Beetle, white Beetle, with my friend Leanne. We're blasting Taylor Swift, driving up the driveway, and I walk out, and she slams the door, and she backs up. She's like, "See you in 2 weeks." And then Willis comes walking up. He's got his overalls on. He's like, "Hello there, I'm Willis." And I was like, "Hey, I'm Carlos." He's like, "You may want to go change." And I was like, "Okay." He's like, "We're about to get to work." Bro, I just watched this man farm for 4 hours. And I was toast. Like I just remember going to bed that night so exhausted from watching him farm. I hadn't even started farming yet. I just been following him around as he was doing all the things. He has 100 acres. He's got sheep. He's got 8 horses that he uses to plow the fields. And so began my journey of becoming a Amish sheep farmer. And I absolutely fell in love with that community. I fell in love with everything that they were. They taught me so many lessons. But yeah, I was farming every single day. I was shearing the sheep. I mean, I injured more sheep than I sheared. Yeah. But there was a lot of blood involved, but I was trying my hardest to,
Wow.
But it was a lot. And the cool thing about the Amish, probably the most shocking thing is I went from almost living in a cave at the monastery, 23 hours a day of silence, to the Amish, bro, go hard. They talk more than any other human being I've ever heard. They are just talk. There was so much talking, so much the opposite of silence.
Was there any time between the 14 days with the monks and then
I had 2 days with my family.
2 days?
2 days in between LA and Ohio that I spent with my family. Actually, I've not told anybody this. In those 2 days in between the 2 weeks at the monastery and the Amish, I actually had a speaking event that I had to go to. And I was in LA, no phone, and it was for the Brea Unified School District, all the teachers.
Okay.
So there was like 1,000 teachers and principals. And I just remember that morning, I was I hadn't been around anyone, just these 20 monks. And so that morning I thought, oh my gosh, so how am I going to get there? So my wife had to write down directions on a piece of paper because I didn't have GPS. So I got in a car with my it was like MapQuest 1996 again.
That's fantastic.
It was amazing. And I drove there and I just remember walking up on stage and being like, I apologize if I look like I'm crazy right now because I actually am, and I did that speaking event. And then so I had 2 days in the middle and then flew and start
Well,
hanging
I was
out
going
with
to
the
ask you about this after the Amish experience, but since you go home for 2 days, one of the things I wanted to know is what was it like to re-enter,
Yeah.
having had so much silence and solitude? Now, you still don't have the device.
Right.
So that's kind of something to anchor onto, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll tell you this. This was an experiment about screens for about 2 days, right? 2 days of the 7.5 weeks was all about the screen. After that, it no longer was an experiment about technology. It was an experiment about community.
Yes.
It was an experiment about connection. Yeah. It was an experiment about savoring solitude, wondering, noticing, all of these things that we've forgotten how to do because we have these screens. And so by the time I got to my family after 2 weeks for those 2 days, I didn't even want my phone. When I got my phone back 7.5 weeks later, my buddy Brian, my phone was in California the whole time. I flew back out to get my brain rescanned, and I'll never forget him handing me my phone, and it felt like it weighed 40 pounds. And I just was like,
wow,
I did not want to turn it on.
Right.
I got panic attacks just even like holding it. And so, so the reentry was the things my family would say. So here's the other thing. 2 weeks with the Amish, 2 weeks with the monks, and then I spent 3 weeks with my family with no screens. So I knew I could do this with monks and the Amish, but what would it be like to live in Nashville and spend time with my wife and my kids? And one of the things that my 17-year-old daughter told me at the time, she's the oldest. We were asking her, so what's it been like with Dad? You know, my wife calls me Amish Carlos whenever I put my Amish hat on that you see here.
Yes.
She's like, I want you to put that hat on today because we got a lot to do, right? So like whenever we work around the house.
Oh, I like that.
Like she loves Amish Carlos.
Gets you in the work
Gets
zone.
me in the work zone.
Okay.
But my daughter said to me, she goes, Dad, this is the purest version of you I've ever experienced.
Wow. Broke your heart?
It broke my heart, but it also was like she said, she used the word pure.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I was only hers.
Yeah.
I didn't belong to anyone else. I wasn't with the Insta Familia. I wasn't with all of these people all the time. I was just my family's. And there was something powerful about that I, have brought into, this part of my journey now. But re-entry, once I turned the phone back on, was really hard. Yeah, it was really, I didn't want it. I honestly, I was having a crisis of am I going to do the same thing I was doing before? Do I even want to do this?
Right.
Can I become a fishing guide? Like, what do I do?
Yeah. Did you consider getting an old school flip phone?
So I got one. Yeah. So I ended up, but my world is how I pay my bills is Instagram.
Well, that's a computer.
It is. It's my computer. Like it's my thing. And so I am now to Ken time. I'm 3 hours a day. 2.5 to 3 hours a day is like to go from 7.5 hours a day to 3 hours a day is really big. So I cut, 4 hours of screen time off. That's still off. And there's a bunch of things that we can talk about later that are like specific things I've done. But most of the things I've done to get my screen time down has just been continuing to apply all the things that I learned at the monastery, all the things that I learned with the Amish as well. And falling back in love with living on the other side of the screen just makes me not want to pick my phone up near as much.
I don't like these phones, and I'm not, I'm not coming at it from a standpoint of where you were.
Sure.
I just still, for whatever reason, I really enjoy reading.
Yeah.
I really enjoy, hobbies and things like that. I stay pretty active.
Yeah.
So I think for whatever reason, it's not like some kid's great at this. It's just, I'm
built
just
that way.
a little bit predisposed.
My wife is that way too.
Yeah. A little old school, a little old soul. You know this.
Absolutely, yeah.
But one of the things that I was thinking about that I think is a challenge for our audience to be thinking about today is these phones have become a lazy distraction.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than giving a toy to a dog.
Totally.
I got a little mini golden doodle, Honey. She's sweet. We love Honey.
Yeah.
But she's a Tasmanian devil sometimes because she's a puppy. And what do?
Yeah.
We give her a little squeaky toy.
Uh-huh.
And that drives me almost as mad as her. But she gets into that little toy, and I can rest easy. She's not chewing anything other than that stupid toy.
Yeah.
Essentially, I think that the screens and constant news.
We can get into that.
Yeah. Well, it's masked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can validate it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm checking this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking right now that one of the things that I'm confessing something.
Yeah. There's a confession.
One of the things I love to do here, we get this big office. You just walk through. We got a big cafeteria, and I don't have an hour lunch. I never take an hour lunch. Never. Don't begrudge anybody that does.
Sure.
But what I do when I do eat is I will sit down and I will get my phone out and I will go to my favorite news app.
Yep.
And I will just eat and get completely lost. And I sit by myself.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the best use of my time. I could be sitting with teammates. My point is, whether that's good or bad or not, I am rationalizing something.
Yeah.
Because I go, hey, I talk all day. I'm in meetings all day. I just want to be quiet.
Right.
I want to read the news.
Yeah.
Well, that is in its own way a rationalization to get locked into a screen and not have a clue about who's sitting around me and all that kind of stuff. I guess my point is we got to be very careful not to rationalize what this really is, and it's distraction.
Absolutely. We can rationalize it. Again, I rationalized it before. Well, this is my job. It's what I do. I'm an Instagrammer. This is what, I talk to my phone. A lot of rationalization happening over and over again, I feel though, one of the points I want people to really leave with is what I learned very quickly. I used to say, I'm addicted to my phone. People say that all the time. We're addicted to our phones. I actually realized we're not addicted to our phones. The phone is the needle. So if you go to a heroin addict and you say, are you addicted to the needle? They're like, no, I'm not addicted to the needle. I'm addicted to the drug that's coming through the needle.
Yeah.
Our phones are just the needle. What's coming through the phone into us is what we're actually addicted to. That's where the hard work begins to happen. That's where we have to start thinking, okay, then what is it? Then what is it? It's not necessarily Instagram I'm addicted to.
Right.
It may be knowledge that leads to a sense of control. So I have found that for me, my addiction wasn't my phone. It was knowledge, because my phone, I could know anything at any time. The news, whatever it may be.
That's right.
Oh, I know this, I know that, which made me feel like I'm in some way in control, when the truth is none of us are in control.
Yeah.
And our phones give us this false sense. So what I learned is that my addiction wasn't to my device, it was to control.
Ooh.
And I think the more and more, and people in my book, I help people kind of get to the space of helping them identify what is the drug that they're addicted to. But it's definitely not the phone itself.
Can we say it's dopamine?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you essentially did a dopamine detox.
I did.
I mean, physical shaking in that first 24, 48
hours. And then the third morning, it legit felt like an elephant stepped off my chest. Like I was just like, it's gone.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm good now. But it took about 2-3 days. And it'll take anybody about 2 or 3 days to get over that.
I think it's important, you and I share a mutual friend, Ian Cron.
Yeah.
And, he recently said we're all addicted. Mm-hmm. Because everybody on the planet's addicted. It's either mild, medium, or severe.
Yep.
And, I did some research. Dopamine, this is the definition. It's a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward.
Yeah.
Eating, socializing, any other addictive, all the bad things that we could think of, the horrible things, socially unacceptable. And when these activities are repeated, often the brain gets used to the high hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
So that, and this is really interesting to me, the person needs more and more and more. So it is the same. I thought it was interesting you used heroin.
Yeah.
They have to keep getting more and more heroin just to function.
Absolutely. Oh, we are rewiring our brains. We legitimately are. And there is no way that our souls and our psyche were created with the capacity to consume the amount of content we consume. It just wasn't. There's research that was done. I found a study from 2017 that shows that the amount of content we consume, the 30 minutes before we go to bed and the 30 minutes after we wake up, is more content than my great-grandparents consumed in an entire month.
Oh my.
So we're consuming before we go to bed and then after we wake up in just one day, more than our great-grandparents did in a month. We just weren't created to consume that much. And listen, you can believe in evolution. You can believe, I believe that we evolve and things like that are happening. We just weren't made for that. And so if we can at least get to the point of saying, I just wasn't made for that, then I think we can start making decisions and start implementing things in our lives that can help us get it back. Yeah,
well, let's talk about that because you kind of foreshadowed it. You write a lot about it in the book. Give us a couple really practical takeaways for people who go, okay, I can begin to start to kind of let this thing kind of work itself out. A couple of practical things and not be so dopamine reliant.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I want to say before we even get into that is that the phone is not bad. Okay, well, we should say this like out loud. Like it's a needle. It's either going to inject good stuff into you or bad stuff into you. And what I had to do was fall back in love with some of these rhythms I'm going to talk about right now. And when I fell in love with doing these things, I just didn't want to pick up my phone anymore. So like the first thing that I no longer do is I try my hardest to not use Google. Google is, I call the wonder killer. When we're at lunch and say you're at a party or something and you're with a bunch of friends and someone says, hey, I wonder what, inevitably what happens is before they even finish the question, we're Googling.
Yeah.
And then what happens is we are, again, the first generation to walk the face of the earth to not have to sit and wonder anymore. Wondering is gone. Wondering is extinct. So what I've done is whenever I say I wonder, or whenever a friend of mine around me says I wonder, I don't let anybody Google it. I go, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to wonder.
Oh, that's great.
We're just going to wonder. And people don't know what to do with that. What, the answer's right here. I know.
By the way, what happens? What's the ripple effect over the next 90 seconds, 5 minutes?
I mean, you end up having the most incredible conversations that never would have come had you just Googled the answer.
Right.
People, well, I think this, and then that conversation leads to here, and then it goes here. And now you're going in a choose your own adventure conversation you never would have had Google the wonder killer not showed up. So first thing I do, I no longer Google. Of course, I mean, listen, like I said, I use ChatGPT to help me build structures around things. Like I'm not anti-phone or Google.
Sure.
I'm just saying as much as you can, try to wonder, bring wonder back in because wondering leads to wonder. Okay, first thing. Second thing I've done is I bought this thing that we used to use in the 80s and I plugged it next to my bed called an alarm clock.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing you've ever heard of, right? I went to Target and I bought it and all it does is just wake me up. I don't pick it up when it wakes me up and start rubbing its face. I don't start like touch. It's not yelling at me, telling me all these things. It just says it's 7:05, right? Yeah. And then so because my phone isn't next to my bed, I've literally in that moment saved 1 hour of screen time a day because I'm no longer just in my bed scrolling through all the notifications that I have or at night before I go to bed scrolling through TikTok or all the things. No, my phone's in another room. I've got my alarm clock there. That saves a whole hour of screen time. Something else I've done, this is for someone like you that loves the news, is I made a decision. I wake up in the morning, I go and I make my cup of coffee, I walk out in my front yard, and I pick up this thing that gets thrown in my front yard every single morning.
Don't get me this excited. Don't get me this excited.
And I pick it up and I walk and I sit on my front porch and I read a newspaper.
Bro.
It's the craziest invention you've ever heard of.
I love it.
All the stories that I need to know are right there.
That's true.
Everything that happened the day before is right there. I spend 20 minutes. I read the comics. Family Circle is still there. Garfield's still there.
Do a little crossword.
Do a little I feel like my old man. And I read it and I savor my coffee. Yeah. And the coffee tastes so much better when I'm not scrolling through email. Yeah. Right? I'm savoring all these things. I have this incredible hour with my newspaper and my coffee in the morning. I'm savoring and noticing. And if something else happens on planet Earth, I'll find out tomorrow morning, right? So we just don't, if we can start implementing some of these things in our lives, I'm telling you, it's going to make you fall back in love with living on the other side of your screen, which is what the whole book is about.
All right, let's go to a question right here.
Carlos, I think this might be more to you about purpose in life and how we're living our life today. Are we doing it wrong? You experienced the Amish, you were there with the family.
Yeah.
With community.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we live in a life, we go to work. We spend 8 hours a day, 10 with the traveling.
Yeah.
We come home, we spend 7 hours on our phones.
Yep.
Gives us 8 hours to sleep, maybe an hour with our kids.
You're getting it.
You were with the Amish and you spent a day with them, and 16 hours a day. They're working as a family, as a community, everyone together. How much of a separation is that from where we used to be in life and where we are today?
Yeah, that's it's a very important question because you're not just questioning our purpose, you're actually questioning our society. And you're questioning the standards at which we are now living. And America in 2025, I believe, is not as healthy as it was before. One of the major reasons is because of family and because how we are so individualistic as a family. Now, listen, that's no fault of our own. This is how we were raised. But when I went and I looked at this multi-generational living, great-grandpa was living in a house that they have. Grandpa was living in this house. They were living here. And Grandpa would still walk out into the field every morning, pick up the grass, come over and tell Willis, I feel like the rain's going to do this today. And he still had a sense of purpose. Like I think a lot of our older generation feels pretty purposeless now. And so I love that question because I do feel like what it showed me was a lot of our purpose, especially within family, has been getting lost. And I feel like these screens are getting in, our kids are growing up seeing the backside of a phone instead of our eyes. And the more and more that we can show our kids that we're looking at them and we're seeing them, I think it's pretty important. And so, yeah, whatever we can do to garner back some of that family time. And then, I think we can make some pretty difficult decisions. I made a very difficult decision last year. This was after the Amish. I never would have done this had I not lived with the Amish. But I bought the house across the street from my house here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I moved my mom and dad. This was the craziest, dumbest idea I've ever had. I moved my mom and dad into that house. My mom, who is 72 years old, my dad, who's 83 years old, my mom still treats me like I'm 15 years old. She's still like, Carlos, you got home really late last night. I'm like, quit looking out the window, Right. But there's something beautiful about that. Not everybody can do that, but I wanted to gain a sense of what purpose looked like outside of my job. I think jobs are very important. I've got a lot of big dreams and goals and visions for my company and things that I'm trying to build. But all of those are inclusive with my family, right? So that's a great question.
It is, and I'm glad you brought it up because I've said this 100,000 times on the air.
Yeah.
I think there's two types of purpose that every human has.
Yeah.
And you touched on it. There's professional purpose.
Yep.
But first and foremost, the bedrock is relational purpose.
Absolutely.
In other words, I think we were created to relate and create.
Come on.
Do you like that?
I like that. Is that on a t-shirt somewhere?
No.
You can make that happen?
But I just, coaching 10,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
on the air,
right.
you figure out, they're calling me about the create part, right?
Yeah.
What's my contribution? But the reality is there is relational purpose first and foremost.
Yeah.
And that's what you're hitting on. And then there's this professional purpose. But I love that you brought this because I want to go back to, so you're there with the Amish and you're there with this family.
Yeah.
And you got no device. They got no electric. Is that right? That's a real thing?
It's a real thing. Now,
so there's no 80-inch TV in the living room. Kids are on the PlayStation.
They had a large old F-150 diesel motor that they would run out in the shop that would power a couple of tools. But that was
I'll allow that.
Okay, will you allow that? Okay,
I'll
cool.
allow
They
that.
literally had to go, so like we're okay.
But I'm curious to know. And you started with the monks, but you had some religious context as a former pastor yourself, growing up in the church. I'm curious to know what the human connection was, because I love how early in the conversation you said, I thought this was an experiment about device. And what it turned into was an experiment of
community.
Yeah. So how shaking in a good way was it for you
to
completely get immersed in a different culture?
Oh my gosh, man.
What did you notice first?
Well, I think what I noticed first, I consider myself a pretty open guy.
Very much.
I mean,
you're one of the friendliest,
I don't care who you
people
are,
I know.
What you believe, like we're good. The way that these Amish, who are very close, invited me in was earth-shattering to me. They first of all, they call it visiting. So whenever they're going to go hang out with someone, they're like, Willis was like, we're going to go visit with Farmer Fred today. And I was like, oh my God, that means we're going to spend 3 hours around the table talking to this guy. And so we'd go visit and he'd visit 4 or 5 times a day, right? And all of their meals lasted 90 minutes long. Like every single meal, breakfast, 90 minutes, lunch.
No wonder they get up at 4 a.m. to work.
Yeah, 100 minutes.
A lot of visiting going on.
Dinner, 2 hours, And I just remember asking him like, bro, why are we eating so long? He's like, Carlos, you've got Facebook. That's how you find out what's happening with your friends. Our table is how we find out what's happening with each other. And here's the deal. In like the 1940s, the average American dinner, was 90 minutes long. In 2023, the average American dinner was 12 minutes long. And what I saw with the Amish is the value and the importance of meals, because meals are where the community happens. And every single one of their rules has to do with how close they can make their community. The reason they don't drive cars isn't because they believe cars are evil. He told me, Carlos, if we allowed ourselves to have cars, if Miss Betty's barn burned down, we could build that thing back up in 3 days flat. But if we had cars, we'd be too far away from each other to be able to build her barn back in 3 days flat. So we asked 2 questions with every piece of technology. The first question is this going to bring us closer together? The second question, is it going to tear us farther apart? That is how they invite more technology into their place. So now I ask myself that question all the time. When I install an app, is this going to bring me closer together into my community, or is this going to take me farther apart?
That's so good.
And so, there were all sorts of things that were happening there. But here's the kicker. I was the only dude that looked like me in Mount Hope, Ohio. So as I'm riding around on my e-bike with my little Amish hat and my little reflective vest, from here to there, it was the first time in a long time that I'd kind of felt like, whoa, like one of these things doesn't belong here. And so there was even a little bit of those conversations that were going on. They were very healing for me.
This makes me think the importance of meals together and really what's going on at the meal. The meal is nothing more than a backdrop for conversation.
Yes.
I mean, you're talking about hours. They're not bringing out more and more rolls.
No.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
And it makes me wonder if we don't need more of that in 2025.
Oh, man.
Because here's what's going on. Back to the phones.
Yep.
There's a juxtaposition of the phones, and they're not the problem.
Right.
But we have access to news and social media, and everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's got an edit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can be demonized and never meet a person.
Yep.
And it's happening in this country.
Yes. Yes.
And there's not enough understanding. In other words, if you and I were to sit down and talk politics.
Right.
If I only ask you who you vote for or who you have voted for.
Right.
And then I make a common sense judgment and go, oh, well, so you are.
Yep.
I have not understood you. Totally. I have labeled you.
Yes. Yeah.
But if I were to say, what do you think about this issue?
Yes.
And you told me what you think of the issue.
Yeah.
And then I say, what gives you that opinion? Is it an environment? Is there an experience in your life?
Yes.
What led you to believe this on that policy?
Yes.
Now, what's not going to happen is I'm not going to change your mind if for some reason you had a different view on said policy.
Yeah.
But what will happen is if I'm going to use the word courageous enough to not be right, not win, but just how about you get uncomfortable enough to get comfortable with how someone else sees a particular issue from their unique point of view. When that happens, Carlos, understanding takes place.
Yes.
I could walk away from that conversation and go, I don't agree with Carlos, but I understand why he believes what he believes.
Yes.
I just have found that is so much more valuable in existing and coexisting and actually having community with people who don't agree with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, do we have another 4 hours? Because this is all I want to talk about right now, because it is, these phones allow us to swim in what I call a rage ecosystem. We're just swimming in this ecosystem of rage 24/7. And what I found with the Amish, go figure, the Amish and I don't see eye to eye on a whole lot, okay? There's a whole lot. And so Willis and I, every night, we would have very long, deep conversations about all sorts of hot topics, hot button issues that we vehemently disagreed on. But I love him. Oh my gosh. And we never, just like you said, the word courageous, I would say that you're being courageously curious. See, I believe that curiosity, and this is what kind of a framework around what you said that I'm kind of building. Curiosity leads to empathy.
Yes.
Empathy leads to trust. Trust leads to relationship. And once you have a relationship, that may lead to change. But what people want to do is they want to go straight from Jump Street to change. I want to change your mind. Well, no, there's all sorts of things that have to happen before change happens. Curiosity leads to empathy, leads to trust, leads to relationship, leads to change. And all of that happens over dinners and over, getting closer and closer with people. But we live in this polarized environment to where everybody says things to me. Oh, the one thing that I hear people say all the time is, we're more divided than we've ever been. And I think I know what people are meaning when they say that. But the truth is we're just as divided. People have always had all the same opinions. We just have more access to each other's opinions than we've ever had before.
Of it.
Yeah. So that's the only difference.
I agree.
Your neighbor has always believed what they believe. Now they just put it on Nextdoor app, which is the worst app on planet Earth. Who would ever put that app on their phone? It's like Facebook for your neighborhood. Now you know who your neighbors are voting for, right? So we just have more access to people's opinions, but these screens are making it next to impossible for us to be curious and for us to have these conversations. But man, I am all in when it comes to how can we sit face to face. Malcolm Gladwell, credible author, just released his brand new book. It's The Revenge of the Tipping Point, right? So he had the tipping point. And he talks about in there, he did an experiment, brilliant, where he got 200 people, super left and super right, like extreme, super left, but told them that they were going to be in a room with all people that believe like them. But he had them actually split 50-50. So they walk into a room, and they have no idea that 50 people are super on the right, 50 people are super, or 100. Then he sits them down at tables in front of each other. And he puts the people in front of each other, opposing views, but they don't know it. They think they're the same. And he does what you said. He didn't ask him to say, who'd you vote for? He said, I want you to write the 20, on this piece of paper, he gave him a piece of paper, write 20 things that are the most important to you. They wrote 20 things. On average, 17 out of the 20 things were exactly the same.
Isn't that crazy?
And then he surprised him and said, oh, by the way, you all voted differently in here. And the conversation and the chatter and the friendships that were made, but it's because they were approaching it from this new perspective that I love that you're starting to share.
Yeah. Okay, let's go over here.
Thank you. A few minutes ago, you made the comment that one of the ways you evaluate technologies, does it bring us closer together or does it tear us apart when you talked about community? How does social media, when I say social media, not just Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, but some of the bigger tech companies like Google, they make a ton of money off of email, which they see as social media. So in your new world of community with being away with the monks, how does this fit into your day-to-day rhythm?
Yeah, no, that's good. One of the first things I did when I got back that helped disrupt my day-to-day rhythm that I feel like gave me hours back. I'm still on Instagram, I'm still on email, but the one thing that I've changed is I have now for 2 years since this experiment, almost 2 years, my phone has been on permanent do not disturb. Permanent do not disturb. I will never get a single notification while we're having a conversation. Nothing will ding or buzz on my person to ever remove me from the conversation I'm in. So one of the reason why I did that is because when I was with the monks, I was probably day 10. I'm sitting with Father Francis in his office, and he's got his books around and his brown robe and black belt, and I'm crying, having this existential crisis, so I'm talking to the monk, and he's there, and he's looking at me in the eyes, and all of a sudden I hear bzz, bzz, and his phone goes off in the middle of my talk, and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, Carlos, and he picks it up, and he puts it back down. And I go, did you just do that to me? Wow. Did the monk just have this, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, like I had a Facebook notification or whatever. And what it did is it took me away from my present reality. I honestly believe that with social media, it's really the notifications that pull us away from pull us into an alternate universe. That's the problem. Yeah, there's going to be problems with addictions to dopamine and likes and things like that. And yes, the big tech companies want us on their phone. They want us addicted. They want us, all those things. But when I turn my phone on a do not disturb, and I never get dings and buzzes anymore, the amount of times that I pick up my phone has dramatically, probably decreased 70%. What I used to pick it up, because I'd pick it up for everything. And then you see an ESPN notification, then you're on Instagram, then you're on email, then you're thinking about work, then it's another thing. No, turn them all off. They'll all be waiting for you when you pick up your phone. They'll all be sitting there and okay, well now I'm in charge of going to it instead of it dictating to me when I go to it. So, I think a larger conversation is the need for those companies to have us on their apps and on their things. And listen, I'm just as sad as everyone else about TikTok. Like that has gotten me through a lot of trauma in my life. But I do feel like we can, and I have become way more in charge of it instead of it being in charge of me. So
I'm writing something down. I'll share in a little bit. But this takes me back to your daughter. When she said, Dad, this is the purest form of you.
Yeah.
It's presence.
Yeah, presence.
You just said that what's happening is it's pulling us.
Yes.
It's pulling us away from the present moment.
Yeah. Because when you get a buzz in your pocket, you could be in the deepest conversation, but I promise you for 1 second, you're gonna go, okay, what time is it? It's 2:03. Is that my daughter? Did she get home from today? And you're no longer present. You're no longer in that conversation.
Listen, if it's getting the monk, none of us have a shot.
That's
what I took away.
I know, man.
If anybody, he's getting interrupted by that, you're pouring your heart out to him. He's like, hold on, Carlos.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We don't have a chance.
No, bro, we don't. So put it on Do Not Disturb, man. Life is so much better on the other side of Do Not Disturb. It just, and I tell people all the time, now you can set up Do Not Disturb to allow things to happen. So like if my family, so any of my kids, my wife, or my mom, if they want to get a hold of me, I tell them, if you call me, my phone will ring. If you call me, or it'll buzz. But if you text me, I won't know till I pick it up. And they never call me. They unless I can count the number of times in the last 2 years they've actually called me.
I have 3 kids. They don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
You know this.
Yeah. So I do know this. So yeah, there's caveats, there's ways, but I just think that it helps us be more in charge of it. We're living our life instead of our life living us.
I will need a tutorial on this because I am technically challenged.
Okay, I got
Anybody
you.
that works with me knows I'm not making that up. That's not for camera. That's really fun. All right, let's go right here.
I'm curious, being a pastor, how this experience has sort of changed the way you view your faith, but in particular, relating to these people that lived this way in the Bible, or patriarchs, or even the people you lived with. Curiously talk about that.
Okay, listen. Are you a pastor?
I'm not, but I was in ministry.
You were in ministry. The one thing I tell pastors now, which they hate when I tell them this, is what I realize when I live with the monks is they move so freaking slow. Everywhere they go, it's just like they move so slow. I'm like, just speed up. We got things to do. I got things to learn. I got things to figure out. And I realized they walk everywhere. Everywhere they walk, everywhere a human being walks, we walk at 3 miles an hour. 3 miles an hour. That's how fast Jesus did his ministry. It never said he was on a horse. It never said they galloped around the Holy Land. Him and his boys walked at 3 miles an hour everywhere they went. Their ministry was 3 miles an hour. And this is what I tell all my pastor friends. If Jesus did his ministry at 3 miles an hour and you're doing yours at 100 miles an hour, who's following who? And it was shocking for me that I realized I think I was actually in front of the voice of God. I think I was actually ahead. I was trying to figure out, where does God want me to go? And suddenly I realized, maybe if I slow down, I'll actually catch up with the voice of God. So it was pretty faith-shattering for me, in a good way, earth-shattering for me in my faith, when I realized that I maybe needed to slow down even the sermon consumption, podcast consumption, all the things that I want to know the answers. I want to become better at my faith, better version of whatever. And it's like, maybe less is more when it comes to my faith. So that was probably one of the biggest mind-blowing things that I realized when I was probably going a little too fast.
Yeah, I feel myself listening to you, realizing what I'm doing, like that control thing. What I'm doing is I'm dismissing old or seemingly old ways of living or writing because I know more. Right. I'm aware of more.
Yeah.
But in reality, I think I'm missing out on a lot.
Oh my gosh. I think you are. And one of the greatest gifts I got was that I did not have access to all these apps on my phone that made me Bible smart, all these podcasts that I could find out, I actually was stuck having to figure it out on my own. I just had my Bible. And next thing you know, I'm reading it without the help of all these great scholars I could just look up on YouTube videos for. And I was like, I guess I'm just going to have to figure this out myself. I guess I don't have a PhD or I'd never gone to seminary, but I think I could probably figure it out myself. And some of the things I figured out, let me tell you, God got actually a lot bigger for me when I started moving slower. I feel like the faster I got, the faster we get in our journey of faith, the more information we consume. Actually, I feel like God starts going like this and Jesus starts going. And when I slow down, it started going like this again. And by the time I left, I was like, oh, he's big again. Thank God. There's a lot more I don't know about him than I thought I did. So
I want to talk about something that you have very, very personal experience with, and that is a leadership fail.
Yeah.
And I don't mean as in a decision about a company. I mean, you were in a position of authority.
Yeah.
You've been open about it.
Yeah.
We call it leadership crash.
Yeah.
If we want to use that phraseology right now. And we've got a lot of high-end achievers. We got people who want to lead, people who are in leadership.
Yep.
And I think this is really relevant to the entire conversation we've had.
Very.
Curious, is it a double life that we're all living in that? I mean, if a leader or just anybody has some type of a crash, I'm just curious, is it some form of a Jekyll Hyde going on?
Yeah, I think that we all intimately, if we really start to know ourselves, I think everybody has this Jekyll Hyde thing that they're fighting against, right? Like if you're spiritual in any way, shape, or form, you're constantly going against, like your heart wants to dance in the light, but then you're dancing in the dark, and you're kind of going back and forth. I feel like we all struggle with that. There are certain, I believe, like so. I'll take my journey for instance. So this was 2010. This was 15 years ago. Wow, that's crazy. 2010 was 15 years ago. That stresses me out. But for me, what's crazy is like it still had to do with the phone for me. It still had to do with me creating a false sense of who I was for the world to see. Because if you're in leadership in any way, shape, or form, you get to present to the world a version of you that your family will just scoff at, right? Like I mean, some people, every once in a while you'll find a leader where they're the same person on stage that they are at home. You know, it's like, okay, great for you, but that's not me, okay? I try to be a little bit better on stage. But I feel like even in 2010, I was able to paint a picture of myself that was whatever I wanted it to be. And I would always paint myself in a way that I would just get comments and likes, and that felt really good. So I would just do that more and more. And that began my demise. That began me building myself up to a place that just wasn't maintainable. And now I think the reason why my daughter said, this is the purest version of you I've ever experienced. And the reason why my wife said, I just love Amish Carlos. Like she cried when I had to fly back to LA to get my phone after stay. The reason why is because they'd actually experienced the pain that can come from the screen.
Right.
They can experience it because, and screens are like super secretive now too, right? Like everybody can be secretive on their screens now. And so I feel like, yes, you know, if you're a leader, transparency is so important. But that's why, for me, this whole thing is about reconnecting. It's not about disconnecting. I'm not saying like, get rid of the phone, disconnect, get rid of Instagram, get rid of all these things. No, it's about reconnecting with the things we were created to be connected to. When you do that, then your daughters and your sons will look at you and say, this is the purest version of you I've ever experienced before.
And if we were to sit with them today, would they say, Dad's back on the phone, all that, but he's still pure dad?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like my kids are still to the point of they're uncomfortable with how much I talk to them. They're like, "Well, you just go back."
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty because what's the best steak you've ever had?
You want the cut?
Sure,
all that?
the cut and the place.
I'm gonna say best steak I ever had was probably about a 8-ounce filet, and it would have been at, I'm gonna say Hall's.
Oh wow,
in
okay.
Nashville.
Yeah.
I really love
good.
that restaurant.
So
yeah.
so if right now I said, Ken, I got $500. I want you to either go to Sizzler or to Hall's.
Okay.
What's the choice you're gonna make?
Hall's.
Every single time.
Yeah.
When you taste what life is like, reconnected.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you're never going to want to go back to eating the cheap fake stuff. And now that I've tasted my kids looking at me that way, my wife experienced it, me that way, I've tasted the good stuff. And like when you've tasted it, you just don't want to go back and eat the cheap stuff again. Not saying I can't, not saying I don't have, days or weeks where my screen time will kind of go back up, but I'm so in love with savoring and noticing and using my intuition now instead of Google, using my gut instead of Yelp. I'm so in love with like reconnecting with the lost art that we've lost of being human. I just don't want to taste that other stuff anymore.
Yeah,
So,
I love that.
yeah.
This theme of presence keeps coming up.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the leadership crash from this standpoint, because I'm a pastor's son.
Yeah.
Grew up in ministry, and you and I have well-known friends.
Yes.
Well, let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
Who have crashed.
Yeah.
And they get a lot of attention because they're pastors. But regardless of what it is, doesn't even have to be moral. It could be a physical burnout. This is happening all the time. Well, leaders just I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
They're nervous breakdown, and all this stuff, whatever it is. One of the things that troubles me that I see, and it's in our human nature, and you have a personal experience with it, so I want you to comment on it.
Yeah.
But it seems so hard for people to come out of what I call the cave of shame. Right? Like it's so hard when you let others down, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's celebrity public, but it's public. In your life,
it's public.
Everybody
in your life.
knows. It's so hard for people to come out of that cave of shame. One of the things that I've loved about your story is you're very public about your story.
I wrote a whole book, Kill the Spider.
Kill the Spider about it. But you don't strike me as having any public shame. And I say that in admiration.
Yeah.
How? I think there are people that are hurting right now and are afraid to get back out on the road of life. What do you say to them?
Therapy.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, like I've been in nonstop therapy or inner healing prayer, whatever you want to call it, since 2010. It's 2025. I just haven't stopped going.
Right.
And I feel like I just am so, I've gotten to the point, Ken, where I know that I can fail on a daily basis. I've failed last year. I failed the year before. I could, for me, luckily, my crash happened kind of pre-cancel culture. So it was 2010, right? So I tell my platform this all the time. Sometimes I'll see people on my platform go after people that have publicly crashed and like, they should never get a job in this again. They should never do this again. I'm like, you're following me. Oh yeah, but Carlos, like you're different. It's just like, no. So for me, it happened pre. But I tell people every single one of us is going to be canceled in some way, shape, or form at some time. Every single person, whether it be just canceled by your family, canceled by your company, canceled by, we have to get to the point where I'm finally comfortable enough. I used to be scared to death. I told my therapist this once. I was like, I'm scared to death. I'm going to be standing on stage somewhere and someone's going to come up and start yelling everything that I've done that no one else knows about. It would be a nightmare I would have.
Sure.
And I'll never forget. He's like, so when that person says that, you look at them. He's like, it's never going to happen. But if it does, you look at them and go, you're right. And actually, I'm actually a lot worse than that. I've actually done way worse than even what you know. So, and I'd like, so you almost like invite it almost. And so for me, like, there's no shame because I'm like, I think I'm healed. My faith is a big part of this. I feel like there is no judgment that another person can have on me that doesn't supersede God's love for me. And so, a lot of therapy, a lot of counseling, and a lot of faith, I think, has really got me there. And last thing, I think that my story of pain that I caused a lot of people and being vulnerable about it has helped so many people that have gone through it as well. And so I've seen a lot of people find healing through my story.
Yeah.
And I just think there's power in those testimonies.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I started our conversation saying that this is designed for us to learn something. And so much I learned today, but I wrote down something that I want to share with you that I'm going to be working on in the next few days. And I challenge you to take it or come up with your own. But Carlos, I just was so blown away that the purest form of me is present me. And that's what I'm taking away. I'm going to be looking into my life am I being present? Because if I'm being present me, I got the best chance to be the purest me.
Yes.
I didn't say the best me, the purest me, because we've all got the warts. And so really, really good. I want you to walk away from these conversations with something to work on. But if you don't have anything specific, take that one, and let's try to be more present. Well, hey, if you've enjoyed this episode, and you'd like to join us in studio for a future live recording, check out the link in the show notes for up-to-date info on guests, dates, and opportunities. Well, my friend, it's been good to reunite and have a conversation.
Good. To reconnect?
There it is. That's the book. I love it. Hey, friends, let's all thank Carlos for being with us. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, man.
That was so fun. Really fun.